Evaluating primaries. This is a very important topic. It has been the topic of many multiple choice questions on the AP exam, and it has also been covered on a few of the FRQs over the past 12 years. Please make sure you listen, ask questions if need, take notes. Okay, evaluating the primaries. There are many people who believe that our system of people voting for a political party's candidate has major problems. The first problem that critics of primary elections point to is that we have too much media too soon, too early in the presidential election year. Since primaries start in January, media starts to cover the primary process in early December. So from December, let's take it back to 2000 and the election 2012. From December 2011 all through 2012, the candidates for the Republican Party had to campaign. It was a very grueling campaign, very expensive campaign. But too much media too soon can distort campaigns. And people who have money early on are going to have an advantage because they're going to be able to buy more media attention. They're going to be able to travel more, hold more media events, and buy more advertising. Early horse race coverage means we never really get to see the candidate's stance on issues. And horse race coverage is when the media focuses on a candidate's polling numbers, like where they are in the race, instead of the issues. Okay. There's too much focus on Iowa and New Hampshire. They're traditionally the first primaries, and especially the media focus attention on these states. And they're very small states. They're states that do not represent the nation. They're rural. They have extreme liberal and extreme conservative ideologies. Like Iowa is very liberal. New Hampshire, ironically, is very conservative. All right, and they're not a good indication of what all of America is thinking about the candidates that are running for the parties. But you have to win these states. You have to win these states in order to gain the big mo. And the big mo means momentum. If you win the early primaries like Iowa and New Hampshire, or early the ones that are held in January, like you can see on that map, the January primaries are color coded in the dark blue. So, and some states are split. Like if a state is split, like Wyoming's split, oh, well, I hope you know where Wyoming is, but Wyoming's right there. Okay, so when Wyoming holds one primary at one time, like one party's primary at one time and another party's primary at another time. But so the states that are in dark blue, if you win those early primary elections, then as a candidate you gain the big mo. You win these, you have mo money, mo media coverage, mo chances of winning the election. So that's how you can remember it. There is too much front loading. Now, front loading by definition is when state parties push their primaries early in the calendar year. Oh boy, didn't think so. Oh, there we go. Sorry. Alright, so early in the calendar year, because candidates have to gain the big mo, and they have to get attention in states that have early primaries. By pushing your primary earlier in the year, what you're doing is you're demanding that those candidates spend more time in your state. Okay. So there's too much front loading. It increases the influence of those states. but it also makes the campaigns longer, and it causes the candidates to spend more money. And sometimes the national party organization will punish a state for pushing their primary too early in the year. But really, you as a state, you choose to front load because you want the candidate to come to your state, bring their money, and bring their attention, and make your people promises. There's too much campaigning. That's another critique. It's a full-time job to campaign, and a lot of the people that are running for office are already office holders. Like Rick Perry, when he ran for the nomination in 2012 against Mitt Romney and Rick Santorum, Rick Perry was governor of Texas. So the whole time he's campaigning in the primaries, all of his attention and all of his focus is going into the primary and getting elected as the Republican candidate, not on taking care of the public good of Texans. So it's really hard to hold a position in government, do that position well, and still campaign for the presidency. It costs too much money. Campaigning costs so much money. If you run out of money, you lose. Okay, people don't lose campaigns; they run out of money, and they can't get their planes in the air. So that's the problem. If you are a viable and a popular candidate, but you run out of money early on, boo. And there's too many people that vote there's too few people that vote in primaries. They have about a 25% turnout rate. Now, these states that have early primaries, or the states that front load their primaries, they have higher turnouts. But states that hold their primaries like in March or April, they have very low turnouts, because chances are by that time the candidacy or the candidate for president for the political party has already been chosen. So if you live in Pennsylvania and you're voting in your primary in April, you're probably not going to go, because by April we pretty much know who's going to be the candidate for the political party, with few exceptions. Okay, so to sum it up, there's a disproportionate attention that goes to the early caucuses and primaries, the Iowa and New Hampshire. Prominent politicians or people with already office holders find it difficult to take time out for their duties, and if they do take out time from their duties to run, they're slacking, and it's not good for their office. Money plays too big a role in the caucuses and primaries. States that vote late in the process are often considered irrelevant. And participation in the primaries and caucuses is low, which means we're not really representing all of the country and what all of the country wants. And the system gives too much power to the media. Okay, so it's, that's an issue. So we could reform the process. The process has been reformed, but we're going to talk about ways that we could maybe cut down on some of those critiques that I just talked to you about. Some people have suggested a national primary, where we hold all of our primary elections in one day, kind of like we do the general election. Now, people in Iowa and New Hampshire don't like this. Why would Iowa and New Hampshire not like having a primary on one day? That's right. I know. That's exactly what you were thinking. If you hold a primary in every state on one day, the small states will be ignored, and the campaign promises and all of that money and all of that attention will go to states with large populations only. So that won't work. Nobody would agree to that. Regional primaries. This is really weird, and I'll have to explain it to you even when I'm like in person. Regional primaries, you would divide the country into regions, and you would rotate which region has a primary every 4 years. So you would divide the country into like the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic, the South or the Sun Belt, the Northeast, the Midwest. And every 4 years, those countries would get hit up for who gets to select, the presidential candidate. It's really odd, and that's why it'll never be pushed through, because it's just so weird. Now, primaries, the process of primaries has been reformed by the Democrats have made some changes to the way that they hold their primary elections. And it all stems after the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago. There was violence and a riot broke out because rank and file Democrats, or the people who were the actual Democratic voters, the minorities, the women, the youth, they weren't invited to be delegates at the convention. And they felt like the Democrats had picked somebody to run for president who was completely irrelevant, and they did not support them. They felt that the person who was picked to be president, Humphrey, by the way, Hubert Humphrey, was just not representative of the Democratic Party platform. So they rioted outside of the convention. So Democrats were rioting against Democrats. Changes were initiated by George McGovern. Okay, George McGovern just looked at the way that the Democrats chose their nominees, and they said the Democratic Party is changing, so we need to change the way we pick our nominees. So one thing that they put into place was quotas. There were going to be quotas for female and minority delegates. So you needed to have at least as many black and woman delegates as you had white male delegates. Okay, there was a no unit rule for delegates. Basically, each state divvied up their delegates based on proportional representation. So the popular vote that you received in a state's primary dictated how many delegates represent you at that state convention. So, for example, let's take Virginia. Let's say the Democratic Party gives Virginia 100 delegates at the national convention. And Barack Obama won 60% of the popular vote in the Democratic primary. How many delegates would he get to send? Yeah, 60. If he won 60% of the vote, then he got to send 60, or he got 60 delegates from Virginia. If Hillary Clinton won 40% of the vote, she got 40% of the delegates. The Republicans are starting to do this. The Republicans did have winner take all. Whoever won the majority of the, or the plurality of the popular vote in the state's primary would take all of that state's delegates in the Republican primary, but now Republicans are starting to do it more like the Democrats, and I'll talk about that too, because that's kind of a complicated issue. Part of the McGovern reforms, though, you got to put in place a way to check the decisions of the stupid people, and that's where you have superdelegates. Superdelegates are party leaders and politicians who automatically earn a vote at the National Convention. So these are people like Bill Clinton is a superdelegate. Bobby Scott, my representative, is a superdelegate. Rahm Emanuel, the mayor of Chicago, former chief of staff for the Obama administration, is a superdelegate. So these are party leaders who automatically, regardless, get a vote at the National Convention. So the Democrats gave the regular people power over the nomination process, but superdelegates are kind of like a peer review. They're not a pledge to vote for any particular delegates superdelegates are not pledged to vote for a candidate like the delegates who were appointed there by state primaries. So they can kind of get to do what they want. Now, a result of all of these changes that the Democrats put into place to try to make the system more fair and open to regular Democrats, there was a decline in the power of the party, and there's more minority and female participation.